You see, this is my life. It always will be. There's nothing else. Just us. And the cameras. And those wonderful people out there in the dark.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Out There in the Dark. I'm Azed Majid, writer, filmmaker, director, producer, all kinds of things, but none of them very well.
And I'm Tom Alexander. I run theatrical releasing at Mongrel Media.
Yes, indeed. So, Tom, it's a long time since the Oscars were on, especially for people who are going to hear this when we release it.
Yeah, and everybody wants to forget about them, so yes.
And
we're going to stop them from forgetting.
Yeah. Mission accomplished, because I totally forgot. No. But we're recording this. Actually, we're re-recording this. Let's be honest with our listeners that we recorded this last week, this episode of on the Oscars. But
yeah, something happened.
Something happened. Some kind of Russian plot, or I don't know. Trump might have been involved. Something like that.
The vaccine. The
exactly.
laptop got the vaccine.
It was the Freedom Convoy. Got into our Zoom. Anyway. So we're re-recording this, which is, we're just, wanted to talk about the Oscars because the Oscars, we're a film show and we should talk about the Oscars. Although, to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big Oscars person. I mean, obviously, I'm interested in them, but they're so fucking boring, right? So they're boring. It's like a variety show, like I grew up with variety shows, so it's all that glitz and glamour variety show stuff. It's just garbage. So
it sits somewhere between a variety show and the Jerry Lewis telethon, I think, somewhere.
Oh yeah. Well, but at least at the Jerry Lewis thing, you'd always get those like Jerry like breaking down and crying, singing "You'll Never Walk Alone," a strange song for muscular dystrophy. But hey, like there was, it was like, Jerry Lewis telethon is like watching like a Sammy Maudlin show, right? It's like, it's hilarious as well as terrible. And like Oscars, I don't know. I grew up watching the Oscars, obviously, and there were some, there's those famous Oscar moments, like Marlon Brando,
the streaker,
the Sasheen Little Feather getting up and giving that speech. The streaker, yeah, and the political stuff like Vanessa Redgrave.
Let's not forget Jack Palance and his one-arm push-ups.
I did forget about that. Thank you very much for putting that back into my short-term memory. It's important.
I have a love-hate with the Oscars because, in the film industry, of course, the Oscars are very important.
Are they really still important, do you think?
Extremely important. Yeah? Oh, yeah.
Like, how much of a difference does it make, do you think, to a movie if it wins Best Picture? Like, in terms of budget, like, in terms of money it makes?
It depends on the life cycle of the film. So if your movie's still in theaters when it wins Best Picture, which is highly unlikely, given that it has to have opened the year before, you get a real bump in the box office. But it's really the nominations that cause the bump. So when the nominations come out, everybody is like, well, we got to see these movies before they're out of theaters. Or if they launch on VOD during that period between when the nominations are announced and when the awards broadcast is, then those VOD sales will go up, or rentals.
Right.
So it is extremely important. And of course, leading up to that is the entire Oscar campaign season, which, completely envelops the industry for the people who want to get nominated and for the distributors who have films that they're hoping to get nominated. And that pretty much takes up the entire fall season, generally speaking.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I mean, I guess it does make a big difference if your movie's nominated and stuff like that. But, I mean, so many terrible movies have won Best Picture.
That's part of the fun. I mean, I'm kind of an Oscars hobbyist, I suppose, because it's just, like, the trivia is kind of fun. Saying which films, when do they get it right, when do they get it wrong, and for every like All About Eve or The Godfather or whatever gets it right, then there's so many more that get it so wrong.
Yeah, like Green Book.
Like Green Book or
Yeah.
Driving Miss Daisy or...
Like Driving Miss Daisy is like a terrible movie. Terrible.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean...
Paul Haggis's
and
Crash.
Oh, yeah.
The
They
Artist.
always give it to a they're famous for awarding rapists, I noticed. Paul Haggis, Epstein, what's his name?
Weinstein.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, okay, so like I get it. I used to like watching the Oscars, and stuff like that too. But I just, for me, I know that this is not news. It's like, well, like it's really all about campaigning. You can't even win the Oscar or get nominated if you're not if you don't have a budget behind you. If you don't have a marketing budget,
It's not.
Like,
it's not. Nobody would think it's the best movie of the year, really.
Right.
That wins
it's
Best
the most
Picture.
it's the most successful movie of the year, so to speak.
Yeah.
Successful in its business acumen, right?
Although some films have won that didn't do much box office, especially since the Academy's gotten more diverse and you've got lower budget and more under the radar films winning, like Moonlight or Parasite.
You're right. There have been some movements, and that's all because of what I guess some people would deride as wokeism, but essentially is oppressed groups speaking up and not letting people shit on them, right? and then that what happens there is that even if the money in the industry is not behind a movie like Moonlight, then it's going to get the word of mouth just because it's hitting the right box or checking the right boxes, and that can be a cynical thing. That can be a very genuine thing, right? So
it can be both. It can be both at the same time.
Exactly. I mean, I thought Moonlight was brilliant, and I think that in general, I would say that when Parasite won and and even this year, Everything Everywhere All at Once, this move towards more representation, for people of color and immigrant stories and perspectives, it's generally a really, really positive thing, right? It's just so super cringy the way obviously the Oscars do it, because it's such a big extravaganza. It's very showy. There's a lot of performative wokeism and
and there's always going to be a backlash. There's always going to be people who say, well, they got it because of this or they got it because of that. And
absolutely. Yeah. And it's just, anyway, it's not so much that I, again, disagree with what's happening in the name of better exposure for people who are underexposed and groups that were underexposed. But I just don't believe it for 1 second when it's the Oscars, It's, because they're such virtue signalers, all those people, right? And they always do it in this way that seems like it just, I don't like being embarrassed in my own house, right? And oftentimes I'm just getting cringy embarrassed because of something horrible and over the top, I'm the most woke person in the world, right?
Well, it's also perspective, right? So back in the early 90s when Dances with Wolves won all the Oscars, including Best Picture, I'm sure, although I was only 20 years old maybe, and I wasn't in the film industry in any kind of meaningful way, but in my recollection, it was considered quite groundbreaking in the sense that this was a film with a large number of Indigenous actors playing Indigenous characters who are multifaceted to a certain degree. And when we look back now, I think Dances with Wolves looks a lot more suspect in terms of the representation.
I couldn't say because I haven't really seen it except for that one time I saw it in the theater. But I think it's I mean, look, you could find a problem with anything these days because everything, this is one of the issues I have with, the virtue signaling thing is that you name any movie out there and I can find something to complain about if I want to, right? Because, I could just say, well, why aren't there any more people of color in this film? Or why are there and when you do show them, why do you always show them like this? So really,
Well, it comes down to like, films aren't for everybody. You can't please everybody.
No, they're not. And it's also like, when you're doing quota systems like that, obviously that's your approach. So you're going to find things. There's always going to be something that's not being represented or not being shown.
Yeah. If you look for it,
the way you think, exactly. If your antenna are up for that, right?
Well, I've always said if you want to become offended by something, and you keep looking hard enough for it, you will always find things to get angry about. And
exactly,
and there's a lot to be angry about in cinema and representation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think sometimes you can find some kernels or something in there that's worthwhile. Like the incredibly nuanced and demonstrative performance of Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves, for example.
Right. Am I supposed? I can't tell whether that's a joke or not.
That is a joke.
Okay, well, I don't know. You've got some terrible taste sometimes, Tom. So I don't know. Sometimes.
Right.
Okay. You don't want me to bring up $1 Million Baby now, do you?
You know what we should do? We should have. First of all, I'm amazed you remember that because I think it's been many, many years since we've talked about $1 Million Baby.
That should tell you something. Yeah.
And we should do a Clint Eastwood episode and just
There's a lot of Clint Eastwood movies I like actually.
Yeah,
even though
too.
he's a right wing asshole, it doesn't matter, right? But there's one just slightly tangential, but we'll get back to the Oscars in a minute. But there's one movie directed by and starring Clint Eastwood from the 80s, which I think is really, really good, and nobody remembers it. It's called Tightrope.
Tightrope's great, yeah.
I love Tightrope.
Tightrope it's a bizarre movie. It's really twisted.
It's twisted, and it's very it's one of those thrillers that just keeps you on the edge of your seat for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And it's gritty and stuff like that.
It's Genevieve Bujold, right? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just not one of his more remembered ones, but he directed a lot of movies.
It's very prolific, and he bangs them out.
He does, and his documentary was really good too, Straight No Chaser or whatever on Monk.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and he did that movie Bird, which was an interesting
I've never seen it.
Mess. It's an interesting movie. Like it's almost like an art film, right?
Is it as good as $1 Million Baby though? Azed? Really? Come on.
The question doesn't make sense. The question doesn't make sense.
Speak English, Tom. English.
Yeah, I'm like an AI that doesn't. I does not compute.
Should AI this whole podcast? But anyway.
Yeah, this is
AI.
This is Chat GPT doing this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Which is why it's so bad. Anyway, back to the Oscars. So, we're not going to talk too much about the show itself. It was boring, but let's talk a little bit about some of the movies. There were, the big winner, obviously, everybody knows, was Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it was a big sweep. I think it won Best Picture, Best Director,
Best
Best Supporting Actor, Screenplay. Yeah. So it swept. So let's talk a little bit about that movie. I'll tell you my experience with it was that when it first came out, when I first started hearing about it, I started to watch it, and I fell asleep because it was late, and I'm a stoner.
It's so not a boring movie.
I know, but I was just like, I just started it the wrong. I don't know, and I also I wasn't really caught up in it, right, for some reason. And then when I saw that it got all the nominations, to your point, right? I got to keep up with the Joneses, right? So you're like, I got to see this movie.
You're a media personality now, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm famous, in a small group of people, like maybe 10.
I have a poster of you in my bedroom.
Yes, I know you do. So all I'm saying is that then I watched it with Ishmael, and it was like I was like, I can't believe that I didn't respond to this the first time. You know what I mean? Like it was so fun, really funny. Really emotional at times, really wacky. I don't find it as wacky as people say, because people like me and you, I guess we watch so many different movies that we different for us is like rare, right? So
Yeah.
I understood what was going on. Like, it's a genre blend. It's just like throwing sci-fi and Matrix and kung fu movies and all that stuff into one kind of like a story. But the difference is that they put like an older Asian woman at the center of this thing rather than a Keanu Reeves, right? So and that was good. So I have to say, like, I really enjoyed the movie a lot, but I don't think it deserved this level of accolades, right? I mean, part of that is what I was talking about before. I think part of it was political. Like, just, it's good. It's not that it's not a good movie, and it's not, in some ways deserving, but what pushed it over the edge against some of the other movies that I think were even better was the checking the boxes there of, it being Asian cast and, half of a Asian directing team and stuff like that. And I think that I don't know. I don't even know whether I care. I don't think I care. I think it's fine, but it's just an interesting point that's what pushed it, because of that whole Oscar so white thing. They've been looking to kind of like make sure that they always sort of go towards the diversity inclusion sort of model, right? So
yeah, I mean, the Academy is not just one like small group of like powerful people, right? It's a huge diverse body of I mean, I don't even know how many, like tens of thousands of people. It must
really
be
that many?
I believe,
like that many people vote.
I don't know how many vote. I don't have any visibility to that.
You have to be like an Academy member, which I don't have no idea what it takes to be an Academy member. They've
expanded the qualifications. I know a few. I know my boss is an Academy member,
right?
And I don't think anyone's saying let's tick off this box. I think it's more that people who. There's such greater identification with those main characters, like Michelle Yeoh's character, as you say, like a sort of an older Asian female. Same with Ke Huy Quan's character, and even the Jamie Lee Curtis's, I think, to a certain degree. And I think I didn't like the movie as much as you did, but I will admit that this movie really struck a chord with a lot of people. I mean, it opened way back in April of last year.
Yeah.
And usually when movies, like I said earlier, usually movies with Oscar campaigns open in the latter, fourth quarter of the year. So often it's a case where like Telluride or TIFF or even New York are kind of the first festival stops, and then any films that open after that tend to be positioned for Oscars. But this one opened way back in April, and it just never stopped. It was, and even, we were still the tail end of the pandemic and how that was affecting exhibition. And the film was still like a big hit on the not just the art house circuit, but in multiplexes all over the world. And people I knew who loved the movie, like they really loved the movie. Like they would not shut up about it, Often I wish they would, but they wouldn't. And just the passion of love for it. And so, after looking at all the sort of Oscar prognoses by September, October, I thought to myself, I actually predicted that I think Everything Everywhere was going to sweep the Oscars, even though I personally wasn't that crazy about it. I certainly admired its energy and its excitement, but it was just too much for me. I don't know. And I know it's just me. It's very subjective, but it was exhausting. Like it just, literally everything but the kitchen sink everywhere all at once.
Yeah.
And
I definitely see that, but I think it's interesting. Like, I wonder if you think, like, because I was thinking about this the other day, that like whenever movies like this one cross over, so to speak, right? Like they're not only loved by critics, but hugely popular with like everyday folks, kind of thing.
Well, it's the kind of movie where people who don't tend to go to the movies much want to see it.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I think in a certain sense, this is what I'm thinking. Like, because like I have a feeling that like all the tropes and like experimental like forms in cinema have become very much fodder for like advertising, YouTube, whatever, right? Like, you know, just like the jump cut, like, you know, when Godard used it in Breathless, it was like, it was like, that's radical. He's leaving the mistake in, right?
Yeah.
And now, of course, the jump cut is ubiquitous. It's old hat, right? So I have a feeling that a movie like this one appeals to people because it's like an introduction to a kind of slightly surreal or experimental type of cinema, right? Like, not for you and me, because for you and me, like, people who are really into movies, you know, this is not new, right?
No.
Like, we've seen all kinds of weird shit, right? You know, but excuse me. And I'm not talking about my porno watching. Hello. Anyway, but sorry. But, you know, no, but I'm saying, like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, you know, it's like the culture itself is kind of moving towards, you know, accepting more and more, you know, interesting style films, right? And you know, our first episode was about Jeanne Dillman being the greatest film of all time, right? Yeah. So there is this kind of
this is like the polar opposite.
It is the polar opposite, but it's still utilizing elements of formalism, right? That I think it's within the sort of shooting distance of an experimental genre, right? Yeah, it isn't quite, because it's not formally sort of disciplined enough. It's more like what you said. It's more formally chaotic. It's like throwing everything in there, and that's its gimmick, I suppose, right? But it is still playing in that sort of wheelhouse, and I think this is the thing. Like, you know, it's like, it's weird enough that it sort of allows people to kind of feel like, oh, this is a different weird film, but it's not weird. It's not weird. It's not too weird to the point where it's alienating, right? Yeah, it's actually very inviting. Yeah.
And, so, you know, one of the things that really annoys me was how it felt like people wanted to like it because it would give them cachet. Oh my God, this is the new A24 film. This is what everyone's talking about. You know, they liked it before they even saw it. A lot of people. And it was a cool factor of, you know, I'll impress my friends by loving this movie, and you know, it just wasn't. You're right. There was a lot of pretension to it in that way, I found, and it touched on so many themes and so many ideas, and it never stuck with any one. It never saw any idea or theme to its, you know, final conclusion, except perhaps the core of it. And I think it has a really interesting core, and we've talked about this with the sense of family and staying together, and you know, the Michelle Yeoh character finding herself through her multiverse personalities, and that's all well and good, but so much surrounding all of that was just like a smokescreen to me.
It's approach, right? So
there's an attempt at, well, I shouldn't say attempt. There's a lot of irreverence to it, absolutely. You know, the whole butt plug trophy, and also these other, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
My favorite part was actually the rocks. I love the rocks. That was great. Yeah. I could see a whole movie about the rocks.
Yeah.
But it was. You're right. It was never irreverent all the way. It was irreverent enough so we can say, oh, that's kind of shocking. That's kind of super cool. You don't see that every day. And
right.
Wow, neato. But it never, I wasn't expecting Sallow, but I mean, it was pretty irreverent.
Yeah,
yet not irreverent enough.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I mean, just, you know, that's all we can say about it. I mean, obviously, like, the movie itself has multiple you can read it on multiple levels.
It is a rich text. Absolutely, it is.
It is. But in a way, when I think one of the issues for me, anyway, this is just a personal thing, but when there are too many open-ended readings in a kind of postmodern way or whatever, it sort of closes the movie down a little bit for me, because there's nothing for me to follow. You know what I mean? I like interestingly, my read of everything is more about the Michelle Yeoh's character kind of having a massive breakdown, right? And this is all a result of that breakdown, what you
Right.
see after that, right? Because, ultimately she's set up at the beginning as somebody who's losing her business, her marriage, her daughter, so to speak, because she's queer and she's, doesn't like that. So this is a woman who's kind of like dissociating, completely from the universe that she's a part of, right? And then it's about that sort of resituating herself back into her world in a way that's more empowered, I suppose, right? Or deals with whatever breakdown issues were there, or just seeing things a little bit differently.
Do you think there's a valid reading if you look at it as if the entire film is something subjective to her, like
I mean,
pure psychology, or just an imagination, or even a dream?
I think it's. I mean, those are. I understand what you're saying there, and when you put it that way, it obviously sounds extremely cheesy and cliche.
Oh, yeah.
But there it doesn't have to be couched in. I think in those particular ways, like it doesn't have to be a dream or an active fantasy. I think the movie, and this is maybe pointing again to its experimental aspirations, is that in some ways it's funny. Like in some ways you say it's the opposite of Jean Dillman, but thematically I see a real connection. Thematically again, not in the approach, not in the and that thematic I think is what gives all of the symbolism and metaphors and all the flights of fantasy resonance. That this is a woman who has been kind of brought to a breakdown because of the hard life that she leads and the kind of position she's in. And it's an interesting parallel with her daughter, who has to hide her queerness because of cultural issues, right? And that's an interesting parallel with the mother, because she's also oppressed by that same system, right? In many ways. And so her own position is to dissociate, and to kind of enter into some other reality, right? And I think that's similar to Jean Dillman, who uses that same kind of dissociation as a means of escaping her own. That's a
very interesting point. I do want to see the film again. I want to see Everything Everywhere again now that it's.
Yeah.
See if I missed something. Did I miss something the first time around, or?
Well, that's the thing. But I do think you're right about it being a difficult film to find a vein to kind of follow. That's my read, and even I feel like it doesn't fully hold up all the way through. So yeah, I have to watch it again too to kind of see whether that's true. But I really loved her. I thought she was great, Michelle Yeoh.
She was.
She's just got a great face. She's very expressive, and she's just immediately likable. And some of the other, like, I thought Jamie Lee Curtis was fucking hilarious. Like, that character was so funny. She's married to Christopher Guest, right? I have to think that Christopher Guest gave her a little bit of pointers, because she was like a Second City character, right? Like very over the top, but also realistic in many ways, right? So I think I'll watch it again. You watch it again. We'll see what we think. Maybe we'll revisit it.
I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it at home, like on VOD. So.
I saw it at home too. Yeah. I saw it at home. I have a giant TV though with like good speakers, so.
Me too.
It was pretty good. Yeah? Do you have a 60 inch TV?
55.
I beat you. No.
If you need that victory, Azed, you can have it.
I do. I'm very, very needy and sad. We can move on from everything now and talk about like other movies that we felt like. I know that you and me both agree that there were other movies that we thought were better movies.
I would not have chosen in those categories that Everything Everywhere won. I would not have chosen it for Best Picture. I would not have chosen it for Best Actress. As strong as Michelle Yeoh is, I mean, I'm certainly happy that she won. I would have gone with Kate Blanchett for Tar, which I
Right.
think is a much better film and a incredible performance beyond one of the greatest performances I've seen in many years.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I think I pretty much agree with you on that one too. I mean, I have to see it again, but
Yeah.
it was a movie that it's funny because when you compare it to everything, everywhere all at once, it's like the difference is stark, right? Like with something like Tar, there are scenes that come back into my head, and me and you both know that when you see a movie, you may not even be super impressed when you first see it, but when certain scenes will return to you, and they're sort of sticking with you, you know that's a good movie, right? It's gotten into your head, right? And I found that with Tar, like there were certain scenes that I didn't quite know how to make sense of necessarily, but I thought about them a lot. Like when I think we talked about this, when she drops off her new prey, like the cello player, the Russian girl, and she drops her off in this like derelict building, and then I guess she says she forgot something, right? And so she goes running after her.
Yeah.
And she goes into this building, and it's this, all of a sudden, in this very sort of straightforward seeming movie, there's this fantasy-ish type thing.
It's so surreal, you don't even know. But then you're also going, is this a setup or
is this real? Like, why is? Because there's suddenly a wolf right at the end of of this hallway, and obviously it looks like nobody lives there, right?
No.
So, was this?
And
girl,
she's gone.
Is the girl? So yeah,
is gone.
So it's like you start to go like, is this girl real? Is this a figment of her imagination? Has she, again, similarly to what we were saying about the other two movies, Jean Dillman and everything, is this a story about a woman, kind of breaking down again, going into into a fantasy because for very different reasons, but her own narcissism and ego maybe can't handle the wound, so to speak, of being exposed as a manipulator or a sociopath, right?
Yeah, and there was another scene too that I questioned whether it was real or a fantasy, where she storms the stage and attacks the other conductor.
That didn't seem like real, did it? Right?
Yeah, because it seems such a strange thing for someone who's that controlled to do, that she would have the opportunity to do that at all.
And even the way the film shows it, like it's never explained how she's there. Mm-hmm. Like it's suddenly she's standing in the wings, right? And it's
she's hiding in the bathroom. She's hiding in the bathroom before.
Right. Okay. Right. You're totally right. Yeah.
But
yeah,
still.
It's an ellipsis of sorts because you're not 100% sure what's going on at that moment. Like, she's been replaced, right?
But that's how you find out. I think that she's been replaced. So I was always playing catch up with the movie, So when that scene happened, for example, I was like, "What just happened?"
Yeah.
Like, she was going into her, and then it's like, oh, they replaced her. And I felt I was playing catch up in a later scene when she goes to pick up her daughter from school, and then her partner picks her up instead.
Right.
And she says, "You're not supposed to be here." And then I didn't know what was happening. I was, oh, I think I know now.
Yeah.
They split up, and so there's a custody issue.
Exactly, and I think that has. That's all. All because you're so, like we're in so much wedded to Kate Blanchett's perspective in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. That when she's surprised, we're surprised, right? And I think that
when she breaks down, we're breaking down.
Exactly. So and there's a real. The reason why, I think the last time we talked, I wasn't as sort of on board with Tar, but the more I think about it, I think you're right. I think Tar was probably the best movie out of them all, because again, there's a strength of filmmaking there, like a really talented director and writer who can put you so firmly inside the character in that way, right? Mm-hmm. That and that's how it works. That's how you get you're going, what's going on? What's happening, right? Like, and you're sharing in that person's mindset in a way that is not in any way cheesy or over the top, right? Like, it just seems like it's just very elegant filmmaking in some ways, right?
It is, and it rigorously intelligent filmmaker, Todd Field. All his films. He's only made like 3 films, I think.
He did, Little Children, right?
Little Children and In the Bedroom, and they're all excellent and
disturbing.
Yeah. Little Children is pretty disturbing. Yeah.
Oh fuck yeah. But he's a really interesting director. I like his style. It's set in the world. It's sort of in the world that we know, and the flights that people take are subtle, and it's more realistic that way because we all do that, right? Mm-hmm. Like in some manner, in some way, we either avoid or don't see clearly. We have blind spots where we're confused. Like, why does this thing keep happening to me, or what? What?
Yeah,
what's that?
Her biggest blind spot seems to be her reprehensible behavior, her predatory behavior.
Yeah, that she's using people like, in this horribly selfish and self-centered way, right? Yeah, her narcissism, that's the thing. You're inside the narcissism of a person who, and that's the hallmark of real narcissism is, you don't think you're a narcissist. You don't go around thinking, well, I'm a narcissist, right? You're like, no, this is the way it is. The world revolves around me, right? So, and, in a much larger sense, you could say that, there's a universal theme there that, we all grapple with those kinds of ideas, right? Or those feelings, but we're not, the vast majority of us are not pathological narcissists either.
Or EGOT composers of,
Yeah, exactly. We're very aware of our own shortcomings, let's put it that way. And that saves us, I think, a lot of us from the kind of destruction, right? It's like know thyself is really, it's really about knowing all the ugly things that you're capable of, right?
Yeah.
And that's the only way they kind of get outside of it,
Yeah, I compare this. When I talk about Tar, I often find myself comparing it to Raging Bull, and not just in terms of lead performance, but in like you're talking about the knowledge of your own shortcomings. And I think De Niro's character goes through, Jake LaMotta goes through a lot of redemption or attempts at redemption. There's this growing realization of what he's done to his wife and to his brother that I think is totally missing from the character of Lydia Tarr, who right to the end seems unabashedly, narcissistic. Even, like she never tries to make amends with anybody, but she tries to rebuild her life in the Philippines.
Yeah. I think, I definitely have to see it again in order to give like a more definitive read.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely
only
see
saw it
that.
Once, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison with Raging Bull, and I think I agree. Like there is a definite, and I think that's what makes a great movie. To be honest, I mean, there's lots of things that go into making a great movie. It's kind of a dumb thing to say, but lots of things go into it. But ultimately, when you're dealing with anything that touches on universals for me, like this feeling of I'm special, I'm different, things don't apply to me. It's a desire for all human beings to get to that place, which is why we, not to bring up that fucker Trump, but it's like in many ways, it does remind me of. People always say like, well, how can people still support Trump? Like, how could you? I don't get it. And like, I'm in that camp. I don't get it. But part of me understands that it has little to do with what we talk about. It has little to do with the politics or the right and the wrong. It has to do more with aspirations of people who, kind of feel like they want to be above the law. Like people want to be above the law. So they want to put somebody forward as a kind of emblem, of somebody who can kind of get away with anything. Right. And that that in some ways gives them kind of peace, right? That all the shitty things that you are and you feel about yourself and your self-loathing and your failures and all that's all justified now in Trump, right? Like Trump becomes that's where he is a kind of sacrificial Christ figure, right? He takes your failure onto him, right? And I think that's really important because we all desire those kinds of things, right? Even if we say, we've dealt with it.
Even if we say we don't, we secretly do in our fantasies. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Like, being above the law is like how our fucking world works, right? That's what capitalism gets you. And you can, if you get rich enough, you get powerful enough, you are above the law.
You can get away with anything.
You can get away with anything. Murder is not even the worst of it, right? You can get away with like literal genocide, right?
Yeah.
But we all desire to be, like Scarface. Scarface is a perfect movie because of that. That's what he wants. He wants the American dream, and the American dream is exactly what he's talking about, right? He wants the power, and the money, and of course the woman comes last, which is fascinating, right?
Interesting.
So. Yeah, and that's why Tar, I think, is a very strong film in that same way. Now, the one I want to talk about, though, more than anything, is one that I think it's important for us, for everybody to know. Like, we should be very authentic about who we are.
Of course.
Sorry. I was trying to be dry there, and I couldn't do it. But people have to know that Tom's actual pick for Best Picture was Top Gun Maverick. So I don't know.
Thank you, folks.
I don't know why you're saying thank you. Nobody's applauding that.
Oh, yes.
Not even Tom Cruise is applauding that. Even
QT is applauding. Quentin Tarantino's applauding. It was his favorite too.
Oh, come on. That's QT.
Maybe not his favorite, but he loves the movie too.
He's always got to pick the one that's the runt of the litter. That's his...
the runt.
The
runt. Well... I was going to say the biggest box office of them all, but no, Avatar, I guess, was. Avatar was
oh, really? It beat
insane. Oh, yeah. Avatar's like the number 3 box office leader of all time.
Holy fuck.
Number one is Avatar.
Probably, yeah. Or Titanic.
Or at least in the top 5. Right. There's 3 James Cameron
They're all
movies.
James Camerons, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the king of the world. Remember that?
King of the world!
What an
my
idiot.
God.
Why do all the idiots always get so popular and famous? Anyway.
I don't think he's an idiot, but okay.
Well, that was an idiot.
That was an idiot thing to say.
I'm the king of the world.
Yeah.
Well, but
Top Gun, the exciting, dramatic, perfectly filmed.
What do you mean by perfectly filmed? What does that even mean?
It's so I love Top Gun Maverick because it was probably the most joyously cinematic movie I saw. Of course, Tar is better filmmaking. Of course, there were better scripts. Top Gun script, which I don't think is dumb by any means, or it's not as dumb as Avatar, which is a pretty dumb movie. I think it's got real heart. It's got fantastic action sequences that are just perfectly filmed. And no, I don't know, man. I loved it.
Okay.
I thought it was great.
All right. Well,
I love Tom Cruise. I thought he was fantastic.
You're not a Scientologist, are you?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, I have some brochures, by the way.
I will say, I mean, there are. I know it's a very jingoistic film, and I know. And to me, it was like an old-fashioned kind of hallmark to sort of the golden age of the Hollywood 50s and 60s, kind of like not really war movies, but they were more like a Guns of Navarone thing, or where a group of highly skilled people get together, there's camaraderie, and they fight a common enemy, and they pull it off. And I thought Top Gun was just right in that category. It set out to do what it wanted to do perfectly. It was not as thematically ambitious as half the movies on this list, or most of them, but it just all worked. I just thought it all hit every button. So.
Well, okay. Well, look, you know what? Like, I make jokes and stuff, but obviously you have sustained this belief now over several weeks.
And I only saw it at home too. I only watched it on VOD. So.
Yeah, me too. But as I said, I've said this to you every time I've mentioned the movie. Top Gun Maverick was like being anally raped by Roland Emmerich and Michael Bay at the same time. Cream pied by both of them. So, I'm not, am I saying that's a bad thing? I don't know.
Hey, I mean, look.
To each his own, right?
I put Armageddon in my top 100 movies of all time. So, what can I tell you?
Well, I can make fun of you all I want, but I have a bunch of movies like that too in my top 10. So,
and Top Gun is like 1/3, 1/4 as jingoistic as Armageddon, which is literally like a giant recruitment poster.
Terrible.
It's terrible. Absolutely. But
just like the other movie that is terrible, but I can't help liking it is Independence Day.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah.
But I love it.
I don't love it. It doesn't go far.
I do love it. I don't know why, but I'll watch it every single time it's on. But it's like the junk food metaphor, right? It's like, yeah, junk food tastes good. A bag of M&Ms and a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi,
which to Azed means Wednesday night.
which is my usual dinner. Of course it tastes good and it's very comforting and it makes, it's sweet and it's like it's very makes you feel all happy inside for the few minutes that you're eating it, and then you want to commit suicide afterwards. But we'll leave that. But the point being that, yeah, that's junk food cinema right there, right? Mm-hmm. It's like,
yeah. Sure, I'm not going to pretend Top Gun is some kind of...
But it's not good. It's not nutritious. It's not good for you, right? Let's not pretend that it's actually nutritious, right? So...
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Oh, yeah.
But let me qualify my love of Top Gun Maverick and my belief that of the 10 Best Picture nominees, it's the one I had the fewest problems with. But I was very, very close on 4 films that I truly loved. I thought were really great. Women Talking,
right?
The Banshees of Inishirin, Tar, of course, and this one, and Top Gun. So, and ask me in 6 months, I might change my mind and say Tar. Or even Banshees.
Yeah.
But
let's talk about Banshees a little bit, because the more time I've had away from the Oscars, like Banshees was nominated for a bunch of movies, but awards, but didn't get anything. I don't think.
I don't think it got anything.
No, Banshees of Inishirin is it was excellent. I thought it was one after Tar. I would say that's my favorite one out of all of them, right? And just again a very a fascinating and talk about slightly experimental. I mean, this is a strange movie. At the same time, it's a very a relatable movie on some levels, right? And it's just that guy, just the setting and the the small village there, mm-hmm. the Inishirin, it's a beautiful looking movie, and the performances are outstanding. Flawed. Colin Farrell is amazing. Of course, Brendan Gleeson is great, and people are, I think, focused more on him in some ways. But Colin Farrell's character was so sad, so beautiful. He was so confused and didn't know what to do. Yeah. It was a sad thing. And for people who have lost, we've all lost friends in our lives, right? And that kind of inexplicable sometimes when suddenly you're not seeing that person anymore and they're just out of your life, and that sense of confusion and loss, because when you're in a friendship with somebody and you both change over time, especially if you've been friends for 20, 30 years, I've known you for 25 years or something, Tom.
Yeah.
So, and people change over time, right? And they sometimes just drift apart. But in this movie, it's like he literally says to him, Brendan Gleeson says to Colin Farrell, like, I don't like you anymore.
But there's no drift. There's no drift. It's just like Gleeson woke up one morning and realized he just can't hang out with this guy again.
I can't do it, right? And then it's the fallout from that, which just gets more and more extreme. I thought this movie was just amazing, right?
It's very poetic, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very theatrical without being theatrical. So, there's a few films here that, like Women Talking, that are kind of stagey in the sense that they could be plays. And
Absolutely,
of course, Martin McDonagh, the director of Banshees, comes from theater, and
oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and I think Banshees was
a play.
It was not a play, but I think it was an idea for a play that he had, and then shelved it. I think I could be wrong. For the listeners at home, do your own research, because we don't do any research. So
no, we don't.
We just make the shit up.
We have families and jobs, so we can't.
Yeah. But
we just go off our genius. No, anyway.
But yeah, it really opens up, I think, to to the open skies and the fields.
Yeah, it's gorgeous looking.
Yeah,
and also just what it says about male friendship is really interesting, right? Because like a lot more we've seen in the last few years, movies about female friendships, right? And TV shows, lots of TV shows about groups of women together, and and sort of exploring the way women actually relate to each other, in many ways enviable, as opposed to the way men do, right? And in some ways this movie really, in a larger sense, is about the way male bonding works, you know what I mean? And that there's always this sort of like it's over, like, it's just sort of like, you're never supposed to get that emotionally entangled with your guy friends, right? And if you do, then the usual refrain from your friends will be, "Why are you acting like my girlfriend?" Or something like that, right? So, and that's what I mean. It's like, it's enviable from a male perspective to look at how women can be very emotional with each other and can be there for each other in ways, they can hug each other, and they can, lie in bed together and watch a movie, that kind of thing. Whereas men are a little, they're always, obviously this is a generalization, but, and I think this is changing for the good, but, when I grew up anyway, it's like, you don't get too close to your male friends. Like, it's always a surface relationship, right? And, so there is this thing
maybe not surface, but
it's deep. Maybe it's deep right. Like, it's deep in ways that
there are boundaries that erect themselves, and you don't know why.
Yeah, exactly. Because whenever something, my theory is that whenever something encroaches, like, we were raised, like, I know you're quite a few years younger than me, but still within the same era, I suppose. Like, we were raised, I think, still within that kind of concept of men. Men have to repudiate the feminine as much as possible, right? Sure. Because that's what makes you a man, right? It's the opposite of feminine, right? And I think anything that came into your world that instinctively felt too feminine, you could just violently and aggressively kind of like thwart it. You know what I mean?
React, yeah.
And react, right? And maybe there's something to that in Banshees of Inishirin too, right? Like, because it's not explained why he says, "I don't like you anymore," right? It also brings up the question, well, how much did you like him to begin with then? Was it making you uncomfortable, right? Right. I don't necessarily mean that in any kind of like queer way. I just mean, like, again, as I was saying, like, the kind of like the bond was getting too tight, too dependent. Maybe he felt too codependent, right? Just that idea that, like, male friendships. I think the movie is really exploring that idea, and I think it's a fascinating metaphor spoiler alert, that he threatens to cut off his fingers every time, one of his fingers every time Colin Farrell talks to him. Yeah, and that's a castration symbol right there, right? So,
well, yeah, because one of the reasons he gives for not wanting to be his friend anymore is because he wants to focus on music.
He wants to focus on his guitar. Creation. Yeah.
So
yeah,
he's killing himself.
He's castrating himself,
exactly,
right? And he's sort of bitter and taking it out on Colin Farrell, sort of blaming him almost for, again, the way you would see classically in a shitty marriage where, I could have been something if it wasn't for you, that kind of thing, right? So, I think there's a lot going on in that movie about gender, and that's why I think even the wonderful actor, I can't remember her name right now,
Carrie Condon.
Like she's so great in that movie, right?
Yeah,
and she's the kind of the nodal point between the two of them, right? So
she is, but I saw her as one of the banshees of the island. Her and then
absolutely
the old crone. Because and it's funny how when you talk about the film being about gender, how banshees is almost a derogatory term in a way for for a high-strung female who is warning people and screaming and wailing. And of course,
absolutely right.
Of course, Carrie Condon's character is the voice of reason, and who recognizes what they're doing to themselves and to the community, and so she longs to escape it. So I think you're absolutely right. It's fascinating. I really like Martin McDonagh. I really admire Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It's kind of a controversial movie, and a lot of people I know don't like it.
I haven't seen that one yet, but I have to see it. But I remember there was a lot of controversy, a lot of accusations of racism.
Right. Right.
But he also did In Bruges, right?
In Bruges, of course, which is great.
Which is so good, so funny, and really, really great filmmaking. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the other movie that was nominated that I liked and very few people else liked, which was Triangle of Sadness by Ruben Östlund. And I like Ruben Östlund, although he's controversial. A lot of people don't like him. But I really loved Force Majeure. Force Majeure was one of my favorite movies that came out in the last few years. And then he did The Square, which was pretty good. I liked The Square. And then he did this one. Now, I've read a lot of stuff about Triangle of Sadness, that it's very cliched, and it's very pat, and it's very on the nose, and blah, blah, blah. I can agree with some of those criticisms, but I really liked Triangle of Sadness. I thought it was really funny. And I thought, sometimes, this is the thing, like, me and you are talking now about Tar, and we're talking about Banshees of Inishirin, and we're getting into a deep dive, right? When you get into it, when you read a film deeper, like, you can start, I think people tend to leave things very much on the surface. When you're talking to somebody, I'm just making this up right now, so it could suck, but when you're talking to somebody and you've just met them, you are kind of assessing them to see what kind of person they are, right? But they're not giving you, they're giving you the surface of themselves, right?
Or a version of themselves.
A version of themselves, a performance. We all do it, right? Of ourselves. So sometimes, though, people can kind of see past that, and they can see into you a little bit, right? For whatever reason. I don't know what the reason for that could be. Maybe they're similar, or they see something similar. I don't know. But they see something deeper. And I feel that way with a movie like this one. I think there's kind of like, people are taking it very much like they've just met somebody at a party, and they're just taking them at face value. Right. And I'm seeing something a little more interesting in this person, or whatever. Sorry for this really clumsy metaphor. but
get to the point.
The point is that the movie's good. No, I liked it. I thought it was a funny movie. I thought it was a smart movie. I thought there was a lot about. I like the way that he kind of used, and I don't know whether this is deliberate on his part or not, but he seemed to be using tropes from various, like, TV shows, almost like Love Boat, or like, and then like Survivor, and then like even White Lotus at the end,
Yeah, I don't think he would have been using White Lotus. He probably hadn't.
Well, maybe.
I'm sure the idea for the films came long before.
Fantasy Island or whatever.
Fantasy
Island. Or Lost. There was elements of Lost in it. Gilligan's Island. Whatever. there seemed to be a lot of silly kind of tropes in it.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. That's what I thought when I was watching it. And I think it was a pointed reference, but anyway, we won't go into that now. We'll talk about it on another episode.
Well, I think a lot of people did like it. I mean, it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes last year, so I mean that tells you thing. But I did not like it as much as you did. I didn't find it cliched though. I don't think I would use the term cliched because there was a lot of, although you're right, it riffs off of a lot of stuff that you just said. But it also brings a very fresh perspective. But I think overall, it took a lot of easy shots and a lot of easy targets. It was a little bit like shooting fish in a barrel. It's easy to make fun of the super rich. It's easy to make fun of supermodels and influencers. And I thought that was basically what was happening. And, there were set pieces in the film that I really admired. I loved the whole vomiting sequence was hilarious.
The poo, the diarrhea and vomiting.
Great.
Yeah, that was great.
Always
when they were all awash in it. Yeah, that was like
awesome.
That was a groaner.
Oh,
a groaner.
Great. And I loved the Russian guy and Woody Harrelson. They were great. I love the the Filipino woman, I think, who's takes control back at the island. There were things I really enjoyed. It was entertaining. I felt it was a little long. I was starting to drift, and not everything landed for me. I'll say that.
Yeah. So this is what I mean. Like I think I saw something else. I think that I don't think the targets he's hitting are quite as simple as that. Right. I think there's a lot about paralleling like particular kinds of relationships between people where it's all transactional, right? Like that. I think that's more the issue rather than just making fun of the rich, just making fun of the beautiful. It's more that those positions, I think, place you in a relationship to the other that's completely alienating, right? You can't actually know people. You can't. Everything's about what you can get out of it because that's the only kind of relationship you understand.
Like the supermodel couple are very transactional and
they even discuss it, right?
Yeah. And when she takes over on the island, her power is very transactional. If you do this, she literally brings the guy over, even though she knows they're a couple. She says, "You come and sleep with me, and you can sleep inside the capsule, inside the sub." So she's not. I like that they didn't make her like noble and heroic. Like she was heroic, but she wasn't noble, right? But not villainous either. Like you.
Well, it's more like who's a villain, right? Like it becomes that kind of a question because like the circumstances really dictate villainy, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about like. She says she says like I'm the captain, right? Like you call me sir.
I'm the captain. Just like
yeah, she basically said that, which I thought was also a bit of a ripoff. But I think that it's a deeper film than people are giving it credit for, at least from what I've read, right? Sure. And I think he's just somebody people like to hate on because he tends to take on the idea of pretensions. So I don't think it was so much about a critique of capitalism or anything like that. I think it was about these pretensions towards position, right? And status is very, 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 very big thing for him in this movie, right? So I thought it was a really strong movie, and he's a great filmmaker in terms of like his movies always look so cool.
Yeah.
And
I confess this is the only Östlund film I've seen. I haven't seen The Square and I haven't seen Force Majeure. And I want to. I want to see them both. Because clearly this is a very important filmmaker. This is his second Palme d'Or. And, it's... Yeah. I need to look at it more. And I probably need to see Triangle of Sadness again to really...
That's 3 movies we have to see again. Oh, no.
I know. Well, it's just when we disagree on stuff, you know, you're just so convincing, Azed.
Yeah, you're very convincing too. I don't know what. Stop! This is getting too. See, now we're getting too feminine.
So I'm gonna have to cut my fingers off.
Yeah, we have to kind of. Just cut your knob off. Anyway, just why do the symbolism, right? Like, hey, Freud, I'm going to actually cut my balls off, okay? And my penis. Fucking phallic symbol this. Anyway.
Cigar. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that was it. What else? Oh, woman talking. The only thing I'll say about women talking is, out of all of them, I found it the most stagey. And some of the writing seemed a little, like, I don't know what the word would be, like a little cringy at times, maybe. I don't know. Just seemed to be maybe, you know, when a script reveals itself as a script, a little bit. It had some of that quality.
You thought it was too writerly somehow, in a way?
Yeah, it just exposed itself as I didn't hear it coming from the character so much as I did as a kind of polemic, right?
Right.
But
that's a good point. I thought it was beautifully done myself. I really
liked it. I did like it. I didn't dislike it, but you know, and Sheila McCarthy was great. You know.
Oh yeah, it's great to see her.
She's like, if you're from Toronto, she's like a hero, right? She's been around for like 50 years. So
yeah.
No, I liked it, but I didn't think it deserved the writing Oscar, right? Because I think one of the weakest parts was the writing at times, right? I think some of the acting was great. I loved, Claire Foy was great. I liked the other woman though with the kids who was being, the one who was being abused by her husband at that moment too.
Rudy
she was the one who was. Yeah, she was the one who was always like against all of their leaving and all that kind of stuff, and she had the most fear of leaving, right? And I think obviously the movie brought up really excellent points, and it's based on a true story, which is even scarier, right?
Very scary, and not an old true story like in the 2000s.
Yeah, exactly, and it's in Bolivia because all these Amish live in Bolivia, right? So. Right. It's an interesting thing. It also has a lot to do with the idea of, the Amish who present as this kind of like almost Quaker-like, like
Mennonites.
Peaceful.
Though I think they're Mennonites, but
they're Mennonites. Sorry, and similar, right? I mean, I don't know. They're probably pretty different, but that idea of them being a kind of peaceful society and just very close to the earth and close to God and all that, and then they're doing these insane,
horrible.
They're raping children and their own like family members and beating them and giving them horse tranquilizer.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, it's shocking. Just it's shocking, But it's like what? That's what I mean. Like the surface of people, right? You never know who you're talking to, Tom. Right? Like
who am I talking to? I don't know.
Me, I'm pretty much an open book, though, right? So I have no secrets.
So you say.
That guy was dead when I got there.
I thought it was beautifully done. I know what you mean by writerly. I thought though, it still felt authentic from the voices of those characters. It felt without seeming forced or trite. There was an authenticity to it that I love. But I do see your point. Yeah. I don't know if there's much. I mean, I don't know. There's not much to talk about. All Quiet on the Western Front.
I saw it. I liked it, but it was fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we said before, like it was one of its failures was he couldn't really connect to the main character.
No. And I have issues around films that purport to be anti-war that happen to have spectacular battle scenes. I mean.
Yeah, of course.
I
agree. Totally agree.
Happens all the time. Avatar, I don't even know if you saw it.
I'm not even gonna see it.
Yeah.
I doubt it. I mean, I might catch it when it comes to Netflix or something. But
I liked it, and I love seeing it in 3D with the high frame rate. It was fun, and again, like he's got it. He's a really technically an incredible filmmaker.
He is technically a great filmmaker, and he can create a world very convincingly.
The world building is unbelievable and literally unbelievable, and the way, even like there's this action-packed last hour that is just so fluid, and it's one of those really huge action sequences or battle sequences with multiple things going on in different areas of the landscape, and it's easy to lose track of who's where, but you never do with James Cameron. It's like the geography and the way he uses the camera it was just incredible. I mean, it really was, but it's dumb. Most of the acting is like, except Sigourney Weaver, who's great. But it is what it is. If you like the first one, you're gonna like the second one. It's the same.
I didn't
same
like the
deal.
first one,
Okay,
but
well,
anyway,
forget it. Yeah.
But I mean, out of James Cameron movies, I mean, of course, I like Terminator. Terminator's probably his best, I think. I like Titanic too. You know, but it's impossible to like Titanic. It's almost like saying I like the Beatles. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, everybody likes that movie.
There's nothing,
It's obviously a well-made movie. It's a very emotional, whatever. You know, it's goofy and terrible at the same time, right? So, you know, it's fine. But like when I liked the one I liked by actually he wrote and his wife directed, his then wife Catherine Bigelow, is that one called Strange Days.
Oh, okay. Didn't see it.
I really like Strange Days. Strange Days is, I think, it's very flawed, but it's one of those apocalypse movies that came out in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like Miracle Mile and some other ones. Like that, I think that was a good one. Was like, that's a really good one. The same kind of theme, like where it's like end of the world, right? That one's really good. So he's a talented writer. Like he can write, and obviously he's a great director. But I find he's almost like Spielberg and Lucas mixed. You know what I mean? Like he's got the techie aspects of like the IT guy like style of like George Lucas, and then the kind of like whimsical world building of somebody like Spielberg, right? But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of his all told.
Yeah,
right?
I'd say the first two Terminator films are great. Aliens, the Alien sequel was great. But, you know, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Speaking of Spielberg, Fabelmans is, you know, pretty schmaltzy except for maybe the last 10 minutes.
The Fabelmans. That's my bio. It's my story.
Why the lisp?
It's got a bit of a
What are you, Daffy Duck?
Oh yeah, he does sound a little bit like Daffy Duck.
Elvis.
I was doing my Howard Stern impression of Steven Spielberg.
Oh, okay. Wow, very layered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Elvis. Yeah, you were saying Elvis. Yeah, the performance. You were saying great performance.
He was great. I thought he deserved the Oscar over Brendan Fraser, who was very good in The Whale, but you know, still, I thought to pull off that kind of iconic figure like Elvis and make it his own without resorting to cliche or caricature, I thought was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I liked Elvis, and I hate Baz Luhrmann movies, all of them. So, you know, this is the only one that I've seen by him that I was like, oh, I like this. This is pretty good. Like, it still had his excessive, like, shitty style at times.
I do wish it was directed by somebody else, and I hated Tom Hanks in the movie myself.
Everybody says that, but
yeah.
I thought he was convincingly oily. Like, he was pretty, like, unctuous and gross, right? And I thought his relationship to the Colonel was really spelled out well in the movie. Like, it became a really tragic... Obviously, we know that the story is tragic, but it was the first time I've seen it fictionalized, and I thought it was pretty fucking tragic, right? And he was not spared like that. That portrayal he did, Tom Hanks did, was, just you want to take a shower after you spend time with that guy, right? So, So I mean, but not a great movie, but excellent performance by Austin Butler, right? That's his name.
Yeah, and it was, you know, much of the filmmaking I thought was fine. I mean, it was just, there were moments that were more restrained than you would usually get from Baz Luhrmann, you know. Yeah,
exactly.
So,
and what's left? Anything else?
That's. I think we covered all the major films. I mean, otherwise, I really liked Navalny, which won for Best Documentary. I thought that was very powerful.
Oh yeah, I really want to see that.
Really strong.
And that's a Toronto guy, right?
Yeah.
You said?
Yeah. Did not like The Whale. Very.
Yeah, you were telling me you thought
complicated
I haven't seen it.
feelings about that film. Like, Frasier is easily the best thing about it, but it's a very drab, hard to watch movie at times. Which, there's been a lot of controversy around the depiction of the 600-pound guy, and the controversies are valid. There is a feeling like the filmmakers are trying to create this grotesque figure. There is an element of fat shaming to it that I really was uncomfortable with. At the same time, the filmmakers have defended it by basically saying that, the point of the film is not his weight, but about why he's slowly killing himself.
Right.
And I think that's true too. But there is so many problematic scenes in this movie. I thought the ending was terrible. And many of the other characters were extremely unlikable. It was just hard to get through, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I still haven't seen it. I've struggled with weight issues all my whole life. So, I'm up, I'm down, I'm up, I'm down, kind of thing. I've never gotten to that, obviously that level. But I would say that without having seen it, some of the controversy around the film does seem okay. So I can only say this because, again, I've had weight issues my whole life. So I'll speak for myself. I'll say that, part of the thing about the whole anti-fat shaming thing is it's valid to me to look at the psychology of any kind of addiction that's destroying a person's life.
For sure. Right?
And the focus on, from both sides, from people who are defending, people can be any size they want, to the other side, which is like, lose some weight and get up, stop eating donuts, right? That whole argument to me seems weirdly irrelevant to the person who may be suffering, right? It reminds me a lot, like, I have a son with autism, my son Django, right? And he's 20 now. But he has, profound autism. So I've encountered all kinds of people who have said to me in no uncertain terms that if I say that autism is a medical condition, then I'm abusing my child, right? If I say that I want the autism to be gone, I'm actually saying that I hate my son, and I hate who he is, right? And they missed the point that he's my son. I know what he suffers from, right? And my whole, as a parent, my whole thing is I don't want my kid to suffer in any way. So, it's easy for people to say, oh, when you speak for your son who can't speak for himself, you're abusing him. It's like, well, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? So, it's like when it sort of like reminds me of that movie Citizen Ruth, right? Like, you politicize an issue to the point where the individual and the person gets completely lost, and what their dilemma is gets completely lost. So I haven't seen The Whale, so I might feel exactly the same way.
You never know. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say like that. So that's one thing I've been thinking a lot about in terms of fat shaming. I agree with not making people feel ashamed, of course, and not making them feel terrible about themselves. That we all agree on. But to kind of go the other way with this is ridiculous to me too. Like, there are people who are using, who psychologically become obese because they're in pain, right? And they have to be heard, right?
And that's been talked to. I have a friend who at one point was almost 600 pounds, and he's now less than 250 or less than 300.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and he loved The Whale. He loved it.
Right.
And he said that I totally get it. He was like, he got it. So, But I think that I guess maybe it depends on. It's a very subjective thing, I think.
Yeah, but a similar movie would be something like Leaving Las Vegas, but with alcohol, right? I'm guessing. So, but it's funny how certain addictions can still be sort of glamorized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like heroin and, and even alcoholism. But when it's obesity, it's like sometimes I feel like the angry response has more to do with people saying, don't make me feel this, right? I don't want to look at that, right? I don't want to see that. It's so nakedly, like when somebody becomes that big, they do become a kind of like, they are kind of like distorting their bodies, right? And their look. They become kind of encased in their own, whatever, in their own,
like a protective armor.
Yeah, like perfectly put. Yes. So, they become kind of unrecognizable in some ways. And so there is something difficult to look at with somebody like that, which is why, it's funny how we're such a hypocritical society. Like, sure, we'll be like, don't fat shame. And then we'll watch like My 600-Pound Life, which is like on every second day. You know what I mean? So
Chris Rock's selective outrage, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Selective outrage. Yes. Yeah. So, I'll watch The Whale, and I'll let you know.
No, I think you should. Yeah.
All right, man. I think that's good. I'm tired of talking about movies right now. I'm going to go watch a movie.
I'm going to go to bed. I'm pretty wiped. I didn't get a lot of sleep.
Too.
I don't know why.
Yeah? Well, yeah. You having trouble sleeping these days?
No, not so much. I get weird allergies in my own house. I'm allergic to the animals I live with. That's the problem.
Oh.
I didn't used to be, but I've developed it, and so there's not much I can do. I mean...
Oh, like do you take an antihistamine or something?
Sometimes, yeah. So it helps. But
I think heroin would work. Heroin would work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just sleep right through it. Sleep right through the whole thing.
2 large pizzas with that, maybe?
I don't think you can eat pizzas on heroin. It's too nauseating. I don't know. You've done heroin before, right? Okay, well, that was an interesting take on the shit Oscars.
Shite.
Shite Oscars. So, whatever. Like, I guess the takeaway is watch Tar and Banshees of Inishirin
and Top Gun Maverick. Although you've probably seen it because it was so huge. So
yeah. If you want to be anally raped by Roland Emmerich and Michael Bay, or cream pied by those guys, then definitely watch it. So we'll see you next time then, Tom.
All right, and we'll see all of you out there in the dark.